Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Fraser and this is the first episode of a new podcast called Prism Inside the Creative Mind. And my guests today are my colleague from Southern Cross Soloists, Laura Coots, who is a singer and arts administrator extraordinaire, and one of Australia's leading guitar soloists and a good friend, Karin Schaupp. So the idea to do this podcast came up during COVID because I was wondering how everybody in the arts world was coping with things. And it also made me think about, the journeys that we've all taken to get where we are today, particularly in other art forms than music. Everybody has attained, very high professional levels, but we all go through a very different journey to get where we are today. And I thought it would be interesting to explore that. Karin, we've known each other from quite a long time ago. I remember when you were about 10, you were tiny, really white blonde hair, just a gorgeous little child, and I was playing in, I think it was the St. Lucia Orchestra, and you came and played a guitar concerto, and it was just extraordinary to see this tiny little thing up there as a really confident soloist. You're amazing, and I could tell from right back then you were going to be a superstar.
You can't have been much. You would have been tiny as well.
Yeah, I wasn't. Well, I wasn't. I was still at. Yeah, I was about probably 14 or something. And back in those days, there were very few people in Brisbane who could actually play the oboe, and so I got asked to do all sorts. So I was working professionally from the age of 14, 15, even though I'd only really just started. It's a bit like the case. There was the joke with the double bass. If you own one, you could become a professional. So, it was a bit harder than that with the oboe, but so I was sort of playing everywhere when I was a teenager, and I think you were playing as a soloist.
Well, that would have been, I think I was probably 11, and that would have been probably one of my first performances with an orchestra, so I remember it well, actually.
Yeah, and so you've got a really unusual background. You weren't born in Australia, were you?
No, I was born in Germany, moved to Australia when I was 8 years old.
Oh my goodness.
I had to learn English, and I went to school. It was like the complete immersion program. I went to school and couldn't speak English.
They just dumped you
at
in
all.
there.
And at the time, I think I was the only sort of foreign child at the school. It's not like nowadays where there's heaps of, much more an international mix at my schools. So that was quite challenging, actually, at that age. Like, I look at my son now, he's 8, and I think, wow, if I just took him to another country now, just sent him to school one day, and he couldn't speak a word.
Oh
it was pretty full on. So I came home the first day crying. But my mother convinced me to go back the next day, and she said, you'll understand a few more words tomorrow, and I did. And it's amazing when you're thrown in that situation that you do pick it up. But I think for me, the fact that I had music, for all of us, music is, it's like a home. It's like a place where you feel safe, and for me that was sort of the continuity of my life, coming from Germany and then moving away from all of my friends and everything I knew and coming here, but I still had music. And my mother very quickly, she was my teacher, she was a very known guitar teacher, so she very quickly had students here. And so, I remember fairly early on I was playing with some of her students, and so I probably was playing music with people before I could really speak to them.
Yeah, that's
even at that age.
It is another language. But I'm fascinated that you learnt from your mother, because I can't teach my kids anything.
Oh no, me neither.
I've had to go out and get other people to teach them things that I'm a professional at, because it doesn't end well.
No, in fact, my son just said to me this week, he plays the trumpet, and he's going for an AMB exam soon, and I was just trying to fix a few things that I could hear, and I was like, oh, Mummy, you've played the guitar your whole life, you've got no idea how hard the trumpet is.
Okay. Yeah.
So I really, in hindsight, I admire my mother for doing what she did. Again, I couldn't do it. Now I have 2 children myself. But it wasn't always easy for both of us, I have to say. It wasn't easy for her, and it wasn't easy for me either.
Yeah.
Because the line, the blurring between mother and teacher is not ideal.
Yeah, that would be a strange thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how that works.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I think she with the greatest of intentions and me really wanting to play and like begging her to teach me, but then not really wanting to practice.
Yeah.
And then her saying,
well,
if you want to play, you got to practice.
You couldn't fake
No,
it.
you can't fake it at the lesson because the teacher's there all the time,
Yeah.
so they know how much you've practiced.
Yeah. Because my kids were they'd have a lesson, so we'd cram in practice that morning. And then they were pretty good at faking that they'd practiced too. So
that's kind of a rite of passage, isn't it? As a student, you just cram it in right before the lesson.
Yeah. So I guess from that point of view, it was very good for my guitar playing.
Yes.
But it did make for some, especially when I was a teenager. I think that's when it was probably hardest for both of us, and I'm sure she thought about throwing in the towel many times. It can't have been easy to continue to teach me, but she did.
You decided you wanted to be a soloist at that point?
Yeah, I actually decided really early on that I wanted to be a guitarist, kind of strangely, and I guess even more strangely it actually happened, and I'm still doing it 40 plus years later. So no, I don't know, I can't, it's actually one of my earliest memories is thinking I want to be a guitarist, I want to be a performing musician.
Yeah. And I'll talk some more about that in a sec too, but Laura, what about yourself? You are a singer, but you've had a more unusual journey, haven't you?
Oh, it's been a bit of a wild ride. But I was the same. I don't remember a time that I didn't want to be a singer. I mean, my mum was like, she sang before she spoke, which is, I don't know, it's just maybe a mother thing to say. But yeah, always imagined that I was going to be a soloist, would dream. My mum was actually concerned about me because I would lie on the ground in my room just picturing walking on stage and opening my mouth and singing, but she thought I was special. But I was just imagining being a soprano, just being on stage.
Yeah, it's amazing because as a parent, you don't really want your child to do a career that is so not, you might not make it and you might waste all that time, and maybe it would be safer to go and, do a law degree.
Yeah.
But
just was never an option.
No.
Mum would always say, you probably won't succeed, and I was like, that's okay, I want to give it a go anyway.
Yeah. So you learnt, actually you studied with Margaret Schindler.
I did, yes.
But then you took a bit of a different route to the sort of regular opera singers.
Oh yeah, I went in many different directions. Yeah, I studied opera at the Queensland Conservatorium under the tutelage of Margaret Schindler, which was amazing, and I was obsessed with opera, but I was so ready to start performing, and in the opera world they tell you, you probably won't have a professional career until you're about 30. That's when your voice is, fully developed, and I was like, I need to perform now. So I went into more of a cabaret and musical theatre route. I went to London, packed up my bag, actually just one bag, packed my whole life into one suitcase, took off and went to London, and I studied at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, did my master's there in musical theatre, and I still didn't fit in. I wasn't an opera singer, I wasn't a musical theatre singer, and so I thought I would just create my own music, create my own work, and I put together a 4-piece opera or classical crossover group with 4 sopranos called Ida. And yeah, we had a great time. We were traveling all around the world doing performances on cruise ships, and 1 minute we'd be in Barbados, the next minute we'd be in Spain, and then we'd be in Australia, and it was exhausting and freeing and liberating, and it was just basically a working holiday.
I bet you were happy you went on a cruise ship last year.
Oh my goodness, yes. The whole industry has just collapsed.
Yeah, I actually heard of 2 people, very famous saxophone player from Sydney was stuck on a cruise ship, and a dancer as well that I know stuck on a cruise ship. And I think the dancer was stuck possibly in the Caribbean, and they wouldn't let the cruise ship dock.
They can't get off. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly been a strange time.
Good for the environment. But
Yeah. Well, good to reassess and good to sort of obviously it's been a terrible situation, but it certainly, I think we're all on this crazy life, this really fast sort of pace. So in a way, it gave us a chance to have a little break and think about what we might do. What did you do during the last year?
And
Did you do last year? Did you? Yeah.
I did. I moved house and renovated, which I was going to do anyway. And then I have to say, and then when it sort of hit that everything kind of was cancelled for the rest of the year, I did find it very hard. And I think like all of us at first, you're kind of in shock. And then you kind of think, oh, this is just a bit of a break. Actually, probably I needed a break, so that's okay. And then you go into kind of, I think most of us shared this kind of journey. You actually I got quite down about it all. And because there's kind of, not really an end in sight. And it, it just has really thrown our whole industry into uncertainty on many levels. So I found that really hard. And then out of that, for me, came a lot of new creative ideas and the birth of a lot of new different things. So and now I'm kind of much busier than I kind of expected to be. And
one thing I've found fascinating with you, and I sort of wish I had time to even think about this. It's a bit risky, but you went into actually acting and performance psychology as well, didn't you? But acting, you created your own show about your grandmother, and you acted in it.
Yeah. So the performance psychology kind of came first for me, and I became very interested in stage fright. And when I was doing my masters at UQ, that was the topic of my research. And
Because you had problems, or you?
I had problems when I was probably about, I guess, 15, just at that kind of puberty age where I was playing quite a lot professionally and suddenly it just became terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's just like a switch. You obviously remember that as well.
It actually hit me when I was older, probably 21, but up to that point I'd never had any problems, and then it was suddenly, I don't know, everything seemed more pressure.
Yeah, and it becomes a vicious cycle then, I think. And so for me, that became sort of the topic of my honours and then master's thesis, and I had a sports psychologist as a supervisor, and basically kind of I had helped myself by then and realised that a lot of sports psychology techniques work for stage fright as well, and then sort of did a study to help, to develop a program to help other people. So that's kind of become one of my research interests, if you like. And then, quite some years later, actually when September 11
Yes,
September 11, which seems like a very long time ago now, but again, in a similar way to last year, found myself with a big, at the time, US tour cancelled. And I had time, and I thought, something I've always wanted to do is take some acting lessons, just for fun.
Yeah.
So I went and took acting lessons, absolutely loved it. But the part I really didn't expect is the incredible effect it actually had on my playing.
Yeah.
So then I pursued it more, and I became more interested in trying to find ways to act and play.
Yeah.
Which is something, I guess, for instrumentalists that is unusual. You singers all get taught to act, and you have text, and so. But for us, it's
it's scary. I think
it's scary, and I think the language of the music that we play, because we don't have words, it's quite abstract, and it's really easy to hide behind that abstraction.
Right. Yes.
And so to have that same kind of directness as you have when you do have a text is challenging, but also really, really inspiring and liberating. So I started incorporating the techniques more and more into my playing, and I found that, it had an effect for me on my experience of playing, but also, people gave me feedback that they were more moved and whatever. And then, I won't tell you the whole story, but basically through a series of coincidences, David Williamson ended up writing a one-woman show for me, which was based on the life story of my grandmother Lotta. It was called Lotta's Gift. And in that I basically performed as her and also as myself. No one had warned me that playing yourself was probably one of the hardest things you can do. Very confronting and difficult. And because of the nature, I suppose, of my career at that point, I was a busy concert soloist. I, by that point, was just having one-on-one acting lessons. I couldn't really, I wasn't enrolled in a class. I did some sort of courses. I even did a course at NIDA. But so I was having these one-on-one acting lessons and then working with a couple of different directors through that journey. So I guess I had very intensive actor training during that time, kind of somewhat learning on the job. And as I became a better actor, I think I also became a better musician.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we've done in Southern Cross Solace, we did some children's shows where we had to act. I actually had to dance and act and be a goanna and play the korongle all at the same time. And we had a great director, and it was a very safe environment because you just feel really self-conscious when you try to do something like that. But I'd love to have more time to go and do things like that so that it didn't feel so awkward. And I don't think most musicians don't do it. I mean, when I've worked with dancers or actors, I'm amazed that they're at the top of their game, but I don't know anything about how you do that in their profession. But you've got a much better understanding. Yeah,
and I think, for me, the interesting thing, I've really enjoyed doing projects where I get to act and play. Like, that's really my passion now, I suppose. But for me personally, but I have to say I've also noticed how much is given me in terms of a toolbox to work with students and to help them with their expression and communication. And it does, it just has a huge effect when you start exploring a narrative and you make that narrative personal. And suddenly, the music, it gives it an extra layer of meaning and authenticity, I think.
So how would you recommend someone get started? Just find an acting coach or go to a course?
I would say the best way to get started is actually through improv.
That sounds so scary.
Acting improv.
Yeah, I know. And like theatre games, theatre sports, they call it, don't they? Yeah, which I think, again, is very frightening. But,
it's very frightening. Yeah. And it's like at the deep end. There you go.
Yeah.
And if you do it with people who are good at it, it's incredibly confronting. But, if you can break through that and just realise, it's actually okay to just open that door.
Well, it's got to be okay to mess up.
Totally, it's totally okay to mess up, and I think that's a big thing for us. It's really not okay to mess up.
Well, you don't want to not perform,
is it? It's just Yeah, exactly. And so we spend our whole lives, I think, just working on perfection. And which is great, but that's not actually. The audience, of course, wants to see perfection, but that's not the reason they're coming to see play. They're coming to be moved.
That's right. Yeah, but we get obsessed with the perfection.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because when you're at college you get marked on it when you do an audition. If you mess something up, that's it. You're out. You don't get anywhere. Competition. It's always like that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that if that can be the first step, it's an important step because that's your toolbox. But if that can be the first step, and the second step can be, what does this mean? Why am I doing this? And you think about what the audience is there for, and I think people are there to be moved, and then you think about what moves people. People are moved when they're actually put in touch with themselves. They don't actually care about the person on stage.
No.
If people cry from hearing a piece of music, it's not because they care about you.
No.
But it's because you shared enough of yourself that they were able to see themselves. And I think that's, I had to learn acting to learn that.
Yeah.
And to learn what that feels like. And then I was able to reapply it to music. And it was a complete game changer for me. It made everything easier.
Yes.
Like even bizarrely, everything was technically easier.
Oh, wow.
Because my focus had shifted completely.
So you sort of stood back and saw the forest
Yeah.
rather than just all the trees making up.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
big picture.
Yeah.
What about you, Laura? You know, I know, particularly when you're doing musical theatre, and I know you were a dancer as well. So you were
Back in
doing
the day.
dancing, acting, singing.
Yeah.
And the thing I can't ever quite get my head around with actors and singers is memorising all that text.
Oh, I'm still terrible. Absolutely shocking. But my acting always came through song. So I actually never had private acting tuition until I left university. We had a little bit at the con, but it was always done through song. And I never did, I never learned a straight monologue, or I never really delved into that side of acting until I got my own private tuition, which is a whole nother ball game, learning all that text and not having music there to help you remember it.
And interpret it, I'd imagine, because if there's a melody, that will help you interpret the text. But if you've got to just talk, like, where do you start?
Well, I interpret it like I would a song. So I would go through a monologue like I would a song. I dissect it like a song, and take each sentence and each phrase and work it back as I would a piece of music. Go, figure out where the end line is, the beginning, middle, end. But just going back to what you were saying about not making mistakes, because it is the same with opera, like it's all about perfection. It has to be done the way the composer intended it to be. And then I was always so hung up on everything being perfect. And it wasn't until I started exploring other styles of music and realizing that once it wasn't perfect, that's kind of when it became interesting. And once I made a mistake and had to react to that mistake, the show then became just more vibrant and more alive, because you're not so much, you haven't practiced it. It's not become kind of dead energy. It's, reacting, and it just became more fun. And so that's what I love. Yeah. Like what you say, improvisation. It's just. I suppose,
and when you have that technique, it stops you being scared.
Oh, yeah.
Of making a mistake, because if you know you can get your way out of it by shifting.
It's exciting.
Not quite as easy when you're playing Mozart on,
With the non-stop,
or if you're playing the trumpet. I mean, my son would tell you.
Yes. But covering those mistakes, and as an audience member, I love it when I notice a mistake. I'm like, oh, they've fallen down. How are they gonna get back up and pretend that didn't happen? And then they cover it brilliantly, and you think, oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
No, I actually love it if someone. I don't love it if someone makes a mistake. I love it if someone reacts to making a mistake by smiling.
Oh, yes.
But not smiling apologetically, but just
having a bit of a laugh. Yeah, I think that's, we need to not be so worried about it. So you're doing some super interesting things now. So what is on the horizon for you, Karin?
Well,
there's something happening.
I've managed to fulfill a very strange dream, and I wonder if this is something that you shared. Really for as long as I can remember, if I've been practicing the guitar, after a few hours you start imagining all kinds of things to, fill your thoughts, and I very often imagined being inside the guitar.
Oh.
And I don't know if you've ever imagined being inside the yoga. I don't know whether, but anyway. So I finally shared this idea with my colleague Vanessa Tomlinson at the Conservatorium, and now 2 years later we're building the world's biggest guitar, and it's premiering next month at the Curiosity Festival.
Okay. Can you actually go inside the guitar?
You can go inside it.
Yes.
It's called the Immersive Guitar.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And it will be next to the Wheel of Brisbane.
This is
on the
amazing.
12th of March.
So South Bank.
Yes.
South Bank, 12th of March. Is it free?
I believe it's free. It's an installation festival, Curiosity Festival, sponsored by the City Council.
Yeah.
So obviously Vanessa and I haven't personally built a giant guitar. We had an amazing team of people.
Yes.
Bruce Wolfe, who's an incredible architect with Conrad Gargett, who was also responsible for the piano mill.
With 11 pianos on top of each other.
16
grand pianos on top of each other.
Yeah, in a building. So he won a World Architectural Award for that. So he's on board with that. His wife Jocelyn Wolfe, who's been our our researcher, looking at kind of what precedents there are for doing something like this.
Creating giant guitars.
Giant guitars or giant upsized instruments of any kind.
Yes.
Then my luthier, Jim Redgate, who's an incredible artist and craftsman and master luthier known around the world. He lives in Adelaide. So he contributed a great deal to this. So Bruce I'll explain who did what at the end. And I'll just tell you who else is involved. Hassan Karampour, who is an engineer from Griffith University. So it's a Griffith University. Yeah, it's very important.
Collapse.
Griffith University project.
Yes.
And so Hassan Karampour and quite a substantial team from the engineering and architecture.
Wow, so it's a whole university project.
So it's the kind of thing that I guess you can dream up and actually do when you're in a university research environment, which has been really exciting. So basically the way it worked is that it will double as a guitar, a playable instrument, entirely acoustic.
I was going to ask that.
Which hasn't been done before.
What are the strings gigantic? Or
so it doesn't have a neck. That was our compromise. If we had given it a neck, the strings would have been so long that it would have been inaudible, just too low.
Yes.
So it has, it seats tightly, perhaps not in COVID times.
Yes.
It will eventually seat 25 people.
Yes.
It's registered for 25 people.
Yes.
So Bruce kind of designed, I suppose, the building. Hassan's done all the engineering, and then Jim was very obviously important in designing the part of it that makes the sound.
Yes.
So he's built a series of 3 sound boxes, which so you're basically inside the guitar.
Yeah.
It has it sort of sits on a slight angle so you can see it from the side, and then it has a sort of a skirt area underneath. And you're looking up. And above you is a sound hole.
Yes.
Which has a little lid in case it rains.
Good.
Very good. And then the strings are actually inside the guitar, and the sound boxes are basically underneath the top, which is actually, in a way, having the sound boxes in those different areas is kind of the way a real guitar works, because different strings activate different parts of the soundboard, according to their frequency. And the strings, so the strings are only the length of inside the guitar, which I think is about 8 meters, something like that. And they're actually only down 1 octave from a standard guitar, so they're actuly the same as a contrabass guitar.
So are people able to play those strings?
People will be able to play them.
And then you're in the room, so I suppose it's the idea that in a string instrument, you've got sound posts in the hollow of the instrument, and the sound is reverberating within that instrument.
Yes.
So your concept is about being actually in the middle of all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a guitar actually doesn't have sound posts inside it.
Okay.
So a guitar is actually kind of a hollow box, and all the action is against the other side, the underside of the soundboard. So that has kind of a series of struts. Very, very kind of thin pieces of timber, and they, when the soundboard is activated by the different frequencies of the strings, the struts kind of influence how it vibrates. It's a very layman's explanation. I've never actually built a guitar, but that's how I understand it. So I mean, it's just kind of a crazy experiment, really. The building is still going, so it's not actually...
Yeah, have you seen it yet?
I have seen it. I was actually down there this morning, so
how
really excited.
So they're building it at the Gold Coast campus?
At the Gold Coast campus in the engineering workshop. And it's built out of, which was really important to us, out of sustainable Queensland timbers. So during the course of its first iteration at the Curiosity Festival, Vanessa is going to be creating a new work for the guitar, which will be an experiment that people can observe. So people can come and see us basically working and figuring out what we can do, what's possible, harmonics, how much of it can we use as a percussion instrument, can I play my guitar and it at the same time?
Yeah.
So there's lots of possibilities.
Yeah, and so are you going to be there every day for a certain amount of time?
We're going to be there 4 days a week at this stage for about an hour a day working on the piece, and the rest of the time it will be in its installation mode,
So
which
people
means
can
people
just come
can,
visit.
they go up on a little platform and they can play the string.
So what, March
12th
12th
until the 28th.
28th, so that's good. That's like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's available, and
Yeah.
right there at Southbank.
Yeah.
How exciting.
So that's
I can't wait to go.
unlike anything I've ever done before, but kind of the fulfillment of a really long-held, bizarre practice fantasy of wanting to go inside my guitar.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, when I approached Jim Redgate, the luthier, I said, Jim, I know this is going to sound really strange, but would you be interested in participating in a project to build a massive guitar? Oh, yes. I've always wanted to go inside a guitar. Not the only
It
one.
must be a weird guitar thing.
Maybe it is.
I was just imagining a little car and just jumping inside a guitar.
I'd love to see what's inside an oboe, because like you can't look, like you look up there sometimes to see if you've got dirt, but you can't see anything because there's no light, so it's just dumb. But I've never thought about building a giant one.
Yeah.
I thought, someone built an ice oboe. I thought about, they've even built see-through oboes made of like plexiglass or something. I've always wanted to get one of those, a completely see-through instrument.
That would be really cool.
Do you have to wear gloves to play an ISO?
I don't know. Elysian did it like 15, 20 years ago. I think it melted in the...
Yeah, you'd think so. Yeah.
I think they must have got it out of the freezer, and by that time the hour concert was done, it was melting.
You have to play in
doesn't
the
last
freezer.
long.
No.
Like everyone would have to join you in that freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it broke, if you had a crack in the ice, then it wouldn't work. So I don't know, crazy things.
So,
Well,
yeah.
that
So
sounds
there you
very
go.
exciting.
That's a crazy project. Apart from that, my year is much more normal. I'm doing much more normal things apart from that.
Yes.
So I've actually doing quite a few concerts with the Arava Quartet, who have been long-term friends.
Yes.
And a couple of other bits and pieces. Also, of course, still teaching at the conservatorium.
Yes.
And the ensemble that I run there, called the Riverside Guitar Ensemble, they're doing quite a few performances around Brisbane, which is exciting. They're a large unconducted guitar ensemble, which is very unusual to be unconducted. Large guitar ensemble, believe it or not, is not unusual. So there's 15 players this year, I think, and that's really exciting and something kind of challenging and unique.
Yes, absolutely.
I've been doing for a few years, directing them. I don't play in the ensemble, I don't conduct them, but I do direct them and work on repertoire and so on. So.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to seeing everything you're doing this year, and it sounds really fascinating. But look, thank you both of you for being part of my first podcast, and Laura's going to be my co-host throughout the whole series.
Awesome.
And hopefully we can touch base with you again after your amazing March giant guitar project.
The immersive guitar.
Yeah, immersive. And let's touch base and find out how it goes.
Please.
And show some pictures to the audience.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.